So welcome to workshop A, reflecting on one's own extended digital self and beliefs. The important thing about the basis of this workshop is that we teach from what we believe. We teach from who we are as a person. And during this COVID-19 period, it has been a great opportunity to reflect and think about who we are, both as people, but who we are also as educators. So I'd like you to come on a little bit of a journey with me, because we have no choice with push change, but to change because of COVID-19. It looks colorful, but it has been devastating. And of course, this changes what happens in our personal life as well. Eat those veggies or I'll change the Wi-Fi password, the ultimate threat in an online family. And in line of this, you might like to consider that some of the changes that are happening in learning, we have no choice about, that we're being pushed. But you've got to remember that change in English language has been going on for some time. So some people, for example, if you look, admire italic handwriting, while others prefer a rounder, more upright script. And so this is in relation to handwriting. Remember handwriting? So if their own way works for them, they may find it hard to appreciate another style. And this is a problem that we have with our pushed change, as we are digitally extended people, otherwise you wouldn't be online with me now. And sometimes in education, we work with others who still worry about the ink in the nib, the fountain pen, and the handwriting style. So I'm going to ask that you, in this workshop, consider your own extended digital self and beliefs as a facilitator, because what we do comes from our beliefs. So I believe in close contact with the people I'm learning with. So here I am with this innovative 10-year-old boy and his sisters and a multimedia project they did on sweet poison, sugar, and how much sugar there is in their school canteen. We can't have this anymore, so we need to reflect perhaps and look at our tools and our own identity and consider our teaching and learning and ask, who am I as a digitally extended being? I'm going to talk for about another 5 minutes before I get you to do something. So yes, it is a workshop, panic not. You have a digital footprint, whether you like it or not. You are being watched by Google Analytics. We know about Cambridge Analytica and so on. You're creating a digital footprint now by what you do. But also, you can have a digital footprint created by what the system does and what you do in the system. Things like banking. You know, when you go and buy on Lazada or Alibaba or Shopee or something, that you get the same advertisements a day later for the pair of baggy shorts that you ordered. So the digitally extended self is part of who we are in this new normal. And people can build up a model of you from analyzing what you do and what other people say about you online. And it's a combination of a number of things. It's what you do, how you shop, what you think you do, and how analysts put it together. So this is big data at work. We are being tracked, and I've talked about this in former symposiums. You have no choice, but this is part of yourself.
Some features of this app, right?
Welcome. Okay. So we've got someone coming on screen there with a green screen at the back of it. So you want to consider the possible digital representation of an individual. Okay, Can I ask if you turn off your videos for now? It makes the bandwidth a bit better. So the core question I want you to think about is, who am I as a digitally extended individual and as an educator? How I see myself online will be part of how I teach, even when I'm in a class. Where do you get your information from? We can't ignore WhatsApp, for example. There are 12 million people on WhatsApp in Malaysia, and we've only got 30 million people. So how do we see ourselves as an educator? And here's what I'd like you to think about and to come back to me with some ideas. How we work online impacts how we are in the classroom, whether we like it or not. And I know now it's crazy out there with social distancing, but I'd like you to consider, what do you do online? Sometimes we're consuming, sometimes we're forwarding, sometimes communicating, sometimes we're linking with groups, and sometimes we're creating. And the other important thing is our students are doing the same. So I'd like you to now take up an old-fashioned either mobile phone or pen and paper and to do a 24-hour in a drone. What do I mean by that? I'd like you to think about your language and what you've done in the last 24 hours to do with being a digitally extended individual. Because this is a time of self-learning. We run a gauntlet of change. We have no choice. So what do you do online? So can you take about a couple of minutes just to reflect and to consider yourself, the tools and the targets? So let me give you an example of what I do online. Number one, for my self-consuming. My wife says I've changed my shopping habits because I spend a lot of time on Lazada and I like technology, so I'm buying a lot of tools. Yeah, this didn't happen before, but with COVID-19, it's changed a lot. So I'd like you to just take 5 minutes to think about these things. Yeah, and I'm going to have a look and take some of your ideas in the chat in about 5 minutes and then respond to your ideas in the meeting chat. Okay, so we're going to do this period of self-learning. Let me go back a bit here. I'd like you to consider yourself as a digitally extended person and your tools. For example, creating for myself. I've had to teach academic writing online, so I've changed the way I teach academic writing and using more visuals. And to do that, I've used a lot of my own photographs, so I've started to examine my own photographs. That's a change for me. So what I'd like you to do, thinking about yourself as a digitally extended person, what do you do online through this time of self-learning, and thinking about your 24-hour in a drone. Okay? And start using the chat to see, how do you see yourself as a digitally extended learner and teacher? And now I'm going to do something that teachers hardly ever do but should do, which is shut up while you have some thinking, waiting time, think time. Please use the chat. Okay, I've got 1 or 2 answers, but I'm waiting for a few more. Okay, let's look at some of these ideas. So here's some of the ideas that we've got of things that have changed, and these would be things that can impact on our classroom. So I'm getting a lot of great ideas coming in now. Let me pull out and tease out some of them, right? Someone is using WhatsApp to communicate with their students about their exams. Okay? And someone else has said that they are consuming more news than ever through push notifications. So the push notifications are providing them with news that they may not have necessarily had such variety from, because it would have been just one newspaper before. So we have someone who unfortunately is in what in Malaysia we call the red zone, and they've developed proposals for small and medium enterprises discussing via WhatsApp and sending files to others. So the big question when you consider this is kind of creative, it's forwarding, it's linking groups, there's a lot of things going on here. So Sri Rajaki has in fact embraced this kind of change. But the big question we need to consider as educators, are we doing this in our classroom at all? For example, we have Srilaja who said they've had to use multiple platforms to connect with students. And I don't know about you, but I found I've been learning an enormous amount about multiple online platforms. I wasn't doing so much before. We were doing some at Sunway, but I was pushed to learn a lot more. So I think the other thing is that I notice here we have Kamali is saying for science, they've begun to use a lot more videos. And videos are a powerful tool for language learning as well. So perhaps we need to consider that the role of visuals has become a lot more important in what we're doing in our teaching. Now, someone else in chat, keep them rolling in, folks. There's lots of good ideas. Someone else has pointed out that they have shared, Tilaga has shared online newspaper articles for students out of class reading. So this is teaching and linking things, and it's also quite creative because you and I know that most of our textbooks in our schools are deadly boring, right? So if we're able to use online resources, this becomes good because they can also have visuals to link with languages, pictures to link with the language items. And it's well and truly proven that the role of images, the role of pictures is very important for language acquisition. Okay. Now, someone else is saying, I've been teaching online and this has been quite a challenge. And during this time, I'm trying to admit someone into the here, and it's been a bit tricky. I've been teaching online and students can see us from home. Families have been included. They have been aware of choices and likes, of not only of what we're teaching, also about what they can see. Okay. Very good point. We're back to visuals again. So students are able to see a lot more. Yeah, and just give me a minute. I'm trying to admit somebody. Here we go. So students are able to see a lot more about what is going on, but they're also able to see a whole lot of things about what is happening in our own spaces, right? So the control over our own spaces becomes very important. Right, let me go back now to the chat and see some more of your ideas. Okay, now someone's made the point, I've been creating. I have some classes and students from different places, and not all the students have good internet connections. Okay, so I've decided to create some LMSs, language management systems, and using some apps for them. Here's a very good point. We are all online, and it hasn't been easy for everybody. Malaysians all know the famous story about the enterprising student in Sabah who climbed up a tree because the university still insisted on having the exams and was having them online, right? So one of the other interesting things here, and Sri Rijeki's made the point, you can find other apps that are not necessarily dependent on being on the web. So don't ignore the role of what can happen with language learning with phone apps. What does this mean? Well, I know that in many schools, they don't like students having the mobile phones, right? But what we do at Sunway is we have quite a strong focus on using mobile phones, but we make it very clear when it's phones off or phones on. Okay, so this then becomes quite important for us to define when it's a phone on or phone off time. Why do we use phones? Phones are an integral part of our students' lives. Some of them can hardly live without them. You know what I mean? Yeah, but you might say, well, it's going to interfere with their learning. I'm going to beg to differ. Even with games, there's quite a bit that students can learn. And I don't think we are going to be able to avoid this. Now, I know there are problems, as is being raised in the chat, about proper bandwidth with Google Meet and Zoom meetings. Yeah, this is a systems problem that we have in not only Malaysia, but certainly in Philippines, Indonesia, and some other countries where we have participants. It is going to change. It doesn't help us necessarily in the here and now, but it will change. In 1994, before there was an internet, before that, there was email. Now, the change is going to come because just listen to my example of 1994. I sat in Singapore along with George Jacobs and colleagues in the Regional Language Center, and we communicated with Waseda University, Tokyo, Monterey Institute of International Studies, and I've forgotten who it was in London. And in essence, it was a green screen and it went H-E-L-L-O. Yes, you got the idea? So whether we like it or not, and you know, let's face it, our government is a bit slow on this sometimes, whether we like it or not, this change is coming. And I know that we need to consider equity issues. So do consider using the phones as well as the internet. Okay, so let's come back to our workshop. What do I do online with consuming myself? Forwarding. This is the problem where we do need to consider whether we are equipping our students with critical literacy. Do you know we have a problem in this country with what I call WhatsApp-itists? People forward everything. And we know we had to develop this 2 years ago when we were trying to get rid of the handbag lady. She who loves handbags and 14 tiaras. So when we were doing that, getting rid of the handbag lady, she's, you know, it's not over till the fat lady sings, as they say, but here we go. We were forwarding a lot of things, but are we making our students aware that with all this information going around, they need to be critical about what it is too, as they communicate? But the other powerful thing, and I notice that some of you are commenting on the chat on this, is that the virtual platforms can link us up with different groups of people. Like we have 14 nationalities today. We couldn't do this face-to-face last year. Yeah. The next thing I'd like us to consider in our classrooms, what about creating? So, for example, in our intensive English program at Sunway University, we get students to use their mobile phones to create presentations, video presentations, and then they submit it to a Facebook group or another group for the lecturer to comment back on their presentations. Now, you know, it can only be them speaking because it's there, yeah? And you might say, well, they're just going to practice and practice, but that's fine too. But these kind of tools are something that I think we've been pushed, and they are sustainable tools. Okay? Those who enjoy the virtual platform were beyond creative. Okay, thank you very much, Shalaja. That's a very important comment. Right, so what do I do online? And this informs what I do in the classroom. I am consuming, I'm forwarding, I'm communicating, I'm linking groups, and I'm creating. So there are principles in all of these. And the principles, I would say, with these new tools and techniques are we being critical about what we're doing? Does it enhance language acquisition? Does it enhance visual literacy? Because the analog and digital tools can differ. I'm not saying writing is not important, it still is very important. But there are an enormous amount of tools that we can use. And remember, our students are online a lot, and we need to move them beyond Clash of the Clans and SimCity and TikTok. So, are we modeling ourselves with our learners in collaboration? Why do I say this? I think there is a lot that our students can offer us. And I don't believe, though, in this digital natives, digitals, immigrants thing. Yeah, because I've been doing online stuff since 1994. But I think that we could consider our role as collaborators with our learners and look at deconstruction of the power status. What do I mean by that? At the moment, you have me talking a lot. It's rather too much one-way traffic, right? So I'd like you to think about, what do you do in the classroom and what do you do online to get the learners to question? So here's my question. How do we, both face-to-face and online, stimulate questioning in the classroom? Because if there's no questioning, there's going to be no real learning. Would you like to think for a minute and come up on the ideas about how do you stimulate interaction and questioning both in the classroom and online? And can you send me a barrage of innovative messages in the chat box, please? And I will respond and share some of those, because this is a workshop and we need to be sharing all the collective wonderful expertise we've got here. So I'm now going to shut up while we have a think about how do I stimulate questioning in the classroom and online, and then I'll share some other ideas. Let's think and chat. Okay, I'd like to see your ideas in the chat box, please, people. What kind of things do you do to stimulate questioning? Or alternatively, turn on your video and give me some ideas about how do you stimulate questioning, both online and offline. Let's talk. And this is one of the biggest challenges of online, right? People don't want to talk, but please do. Think of yourself and how you stimulate questioning, realizing too the kind of things that you do. Here we go. Okay, KRW Shailaja, tell us what you do. Oh, my neighborhood dog.
Hello everyone, morning.
Morning, where are you from?
Oh, I'm from Kuala Selangor,
Okay.
right here in Malaysia.
Very good. Okay, now powered by seafood, tell us what you do.
Okay, normally I get students to come in with photos, or they come in with an idea or a concept, and then they either write it out on the board, if this is in the classroom.
Yeah.
When we were offline, I used the Jamboard. So what the friends had to do is, depending on bandwidth, either they typed out their question or they typed out their, how do you say, their opinion, or they asked questions where the person now who posted the photo is also in the hot seat. So there was communication and I played facilitator. Basically, I would either help them with turn taking. And when I said I use the what I see, what I guess, what I know model, that is how I train my younger students to look at something and begin questioning and to formulate ideas and concepts. And
this
that
is fantastic.
and
I want to go back. The app that you used was called Jamboard, was it?
Yes, that's available in Google Classroom.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So I use the Jamboard, and as I said, because of the bandwidth issues, some would come online and would respond. Rest would just scribble on the board. So that was how I got the children to come in and play a role, be active. It wasn't one way. It wasn't just me talking or me posting information. It was them coming in. So that's why I used the term flipped classroom, because I would give them the assignment a week before. And that's how I would run my sessions offline as well as online.
Okay. So in a way, what we're seeing as push change in this new normal is in fact something that perhaps you were already doing in the classroom. Would that be correct?
Yes.
The
And that's
principle.
why earlier I mentioned, I found that half my students were not so keen coming online because they needed that face-to-face interaction. So that's why I had to, how do you say, jazz it up.
Okay, now there's a very important point you've made. The face-to-face thing is the thing everybody says is missing. So when you use the term, as I see some other people here are saying they provide videos and pictures in a flipped classroom model before they actually had the lesson. But what did you do to, as you put it, jazz it up? Because this is a new normal, you're jazzing it up, right? Yeah. So what was the jazzing up that you did?
Basically, it's more empowering here now because students were able to use videos and music clips. Some of them even did the TikTok thing. So I allowed that kind of, I gave them permission. I empowered them. But of course, with a few terms and conditions, because they had to understand, other people's sensitivities and things like that. So they felt very empowered. That's what I meant by those who were online, who really enjoyed the platform, were really, really beyond creative. So that's how we do it. Because in my school, unfortunately, yes, we don't allow digital devices. So this is when I jazzed it up by allowing them to bring in normally what they have at home into the school area.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really good. I'd just like to move on to some other ideas which are kind of similar to yours. Because you see, you've made a point already, you're not allowed to have digital devices in schools. Let me tell you, there was one time, and I'm an old enough guy to remember this, there was one time when ballpoint pens, the normal pen that we would use, were banned from schools because it would lead to the death of writing with ink. Yeah? So you imagine if now everybody had to use fountain pens or the inkwell and the quill. So I also think it's quite important that as teachers, such as you are here, all of you, that you go ahead with the methodology, because you and I know that when we close the classroom door, we are in control. And the record book is a work of fiction that we hand in at the end of the week. Yeah, whoops. But let's look at what some other people are doing in terms of deconstructing the power status. This is Hofstede's model of teacher transmission, yeah, where the teacher is dispensing information. Let's say we're moving beyond that. Let's look at things like Belinda. Belinda, it sounds like you've got almost a flipped classroom idea and the use of Padlet. Would you like to tell us about how you deconstruct the talking head teacher at the front thing by your use of videos and Padlet? Belinda, could we hear from you?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So I upload the video or pictures to stimulate them to know about the topic we're going to learn that day, and then after that I ask them to share their ideas related to that videos or pictures, and then use the Padlet, and then so they can share their ideas right there to about that one, and then after that it's in Google Meet, yeah. So and then after that, I'm going to ask them to share their ideas and speak through Google Meet. So that's
okay.
it.
Yeah, that's great, because I think the thing to realize too, we're all exploring different platforms, right? I'm very unfamiliar with Google Meet, but I'm more familiar with Teams and with Zoom, yeah? But actually the platforms are not really the most important thing, are they? It's what you're getting the learners to do so that they have pushed output. They are using the language, because there's a lot of research by people like my former teacher, Professor Paul Nation, from Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand, where he talks about it is the use of the language that is the acquisition of the language. So you're getting students to write on Padlet, yeah? Maybe, can you just briefly, I know what it is, but maybe not everyone else does. Can you briefly just explain what you use Padlet for, please, Belinda? Because you are empowering the learners and you're deconstructing the talking head teacher at the front, right? So can you tell us a bit about the Padlet side?
Okay, actually for the Padlet, I can just go to padlet.com and then I will share the link to the students and then padlet.com, right? And then I will give the instruction to the student. So after that, the student can, share their ideas by writing there. There's a plus, icon there. And then the student can write down there. They can share any ideas there related to that topic. So that's it. That's how I use Padlet. And then after that, through Google Meet, I will, start the discussion, and then the student can share, oh, what do you think? Hey, why do you think this one? And then they can share blah 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 like that one. That's it.
Because I suppose like as coming up in the chat now, whether you're using Padlet or you're using Kahoot Quiz or you're using Quizlet, there are a number of these apps, and the free versions are quite good. Yeah, and Socrative as well. There are a number of these. But the main thing I think that's so important, that is the new normal, is pushing our output, is pushing the students' output, is the opportunity for them to contribute. And in a certain extent, I don't know what you think, but to a certain extent, these kind of quizzes, as it's coming up in the chat, yes, but these kind of systems, create the voice for the learner. And I think it's also important we see it as fluency practice and we don't hammer their accuracy, right? Because once they contribute, they want to feel that their contribution is valued, but also we are able to see what their real level of language is and later address the accuracy issues. But I think this kind of interactive activity, such as some of my colleagues are sharing in the workshops later on, Joseph Pang from Johor, for example, is talking about creating TikTok. I think then this role of letting learners be creative is very, very important. Yeah, it helps a sense of ownership. Okay. Well, we've got some incredibly good practices that are happening out there. Someone says, before I start a lesson, I project a 1-minute video to activate their schemata. And I think one thing that's a common thread coming through all your different suggestions is that the role of videos is very important, the role of visuals. So maybe we should now consider this is the new normal that's going on, right? But maybe we should consider what happens in the future. So thank you all for your best practices, because it's so important that we learn from each other. But here's a question as we reflect on this push change. Where will we be in 2 years with teaching and learning? Because the problem, I think, is the ministry will move slowly, and I don't know about in the Philippines, where I know some of you in this workshop come from, and I don't know about Indonesia. Well, I do know about Indonesia. The ministry is going to be the slowest to change. The students are already there. In phone apps, for example, which I'm interested in and which I use, Duolingo now has 14 million people learning languages on phones, and they only started 6 years ago. Yeah. Now the ministry are going to move slowly, but remember what we do behind our closed doors. It's our classroom. And I know that assessment is going to be a pain. but it will change because our graduates are coming out ill-equipped to deal with the modern world. So we as educators have an advantage if we are digitally literate and are using digital tools because we're developing these competencies in our learners. And the classrooms are the crucible for change. And we control the real interaction. I know there's the inspectors, I know there's the headmaster, but you and I know when we close the door, we can do what we like, really. Whoops, but true. Yeah? So perhaps we need to consider some new things to do with assessment, about mastery learning, open book exams, and considering competencies, not content. Digital literacy is a skill that sells. And the ministry have to wake up to this fact that there is going to be more blended learning. So I know in 2 years' time in Sunway University, we will have a lot more online. We won't avoid the importance of face-to-face individualized learning. But in terms of reaching people, blended learning is going to be very important, as are flipped classrooms, which some of you have talked about and shown that you are doing already. It is the new vocabulary for the new norm. Just like virtual student exchanges, I was teaching across 5 countries on Tuesday for a virtual student exchange that we have set up with Japan, Indonesia, a few other countries as well. So in my next session, I will talk about the importance of rapport, interpreting different texts, and engagement, because this is a passage of learning with COVID-19, and I think it's been an opportunity where we've been pushed towards different change. So here's Rabindranath Tagore again: a teacher can never truly teach unless he's still learning himself or herself. A lamp can never light another lamp unless it continues to burn its own flame. The teacher who has come to the end of his subject, who has no living traffic with his knowledge, but merely repeats his lesson to his students, can only load their minds. He cannot quicken them. So I've asked you to think about yourself, the tools that you use, and also maybe your digitally extended identity for teaching and learning in the new normal. But there's no really right answer, just more questions. We have 5 minutes for something that is most important in learning. Are there any questions, please? Thank you so much for contributing your ideas. It's so encouraging to see so much progressive pedagogy happening in schools. And if it isn't all in the exam, that's not the point. We develop the competencies and the skills. Do you have any questions for me, please? Because questioning is how I think we really learn. You can just put them in the chat and I'll go for it. I'll pick up one already. Yes, your identity on social media is very important because students can track and follow you on FB, Twitter, and Instagram. Santi, I totally agree. You have to be very careful about your social identity. I keep my personal delight in wine tasting quite separate from my educational identity. And yes, I actually think teaching students about their digital identity is really important too, especially the safety of young people in this troubled world. Okay, now Shanti, teachers should be given more authority and trust in teaching and assessment. Thoroughly agree. This is one of the problems we have with a centralized education system in many of the countries of people are listening now. Yeah, so we can only do the best that we can in our own classrooms and push the administration by the examples of what we have in our classrooms. Any last few questions? Right, I'd like to thank you all very, very much for being part of this workshop. I hope you found it beneficial. You will see my email in my next presentation, but it's now time for you all to move on to session 2 workshops. Thank you for being part of this, and we also, of course, look forward to seeing you in next year's symposium. We will be posting these and links to these on the Selves Facebook page. And you say it could be a Pandora's box when education becomes open, but in Pandora's box, there were also some very good things that came out. Thank you all very much, and I always love people who call me fabulous. Time to go to the next session. Thank you very much, everyone.